ultrabeasts as a subclass or subcategory or just group of Pokemon are really neato mosquito. Neat mesquite, even if some of them are just... Behold, a Pokemon. So, on top of being interdimensional aliens from Ultra Space, all having the Beast Boost ability and all having a stat total of 570, the Ultra Beasts are also all based on invasive species, which is when an organism is brought into an area it's not native to, and it thrives to the point of dealing a lot of damage to the local ecosystem. Alola is the perfect region for this. Hawaii is filled with invasive species, and islands in general are prone to receiving the most damage from them. But when it comes to today's Ultra Beasts, are electrical cables really an invasive species? Granted, Xurkitree is also a tree, an alien tree. This is what trees look like on its homeworld. It's sort of the same deal with Kartana. It's just a plant, an alien plant. This is what plants look like on that alien world. But get this, back when electricity was first being put in cities, the cables were everywhere in a tangled mess, choking people and nature out because there were multiple power companies, all with their own cables going every which way. It's almost like utilities shouldn't be privatized. But then, like, look at these old anti-electricity cartoons. Yeah, they look silly, but they weren't exaggerating that much. Electric cables were prolific and everywhere, and when they started spreading out of the cities and into rural lands, yeah, they started taking over nature too. But cables aren't really a species, are they? But Xurkitree being a tree, and it looking like this, makes me think of the strangling fig, or ficus. A group of fig trees that grow in very distinct tangly ways on host trees to choke them out, and they kinda resemble Xurkitree's writhing body. And these trees being a parasite to a host, well, that's pretty alien, isn't it? Easy sci-fi alien tropes. Plus, if you think of Xurkitree's tail as a third leg, it's like a tripod, the iconic ships from War of the Worlds, which is especially notable as War of the Worlds is a classic and iconic piece of alien invasion science fiction that basically started the whole genre, at the very least in pop fiction. Plus, Xurkitree's whole deal is plugging into power plants and draining their power, or just plugging right into the earth and stealing power from the ground. It's just like the alien trope of them invading to steal our natural resources. But back to the strangling fig, ficus of all kind are non-native to Hawaii, and yet there are plenty of them there, brought over as landscaping or for interior design. But thankfully, it's not a huge deal, because these ficuses need a specific wasp, the fig wasp, in order to pollinate. A wasp which is not found in Hawaii, so these plants could not be spread naturally, so no big deal. But guess what happened? Yeah, the fig wasp arrived in 2007, the same year the internet put a foot in the grave. So now the ficuses are going nuts, especially as they don't need soil to grow, they just need a wee bit of water, and those roots are diving into anything they can get their grubby little mitts on. Specifically, the bow tree or Ficus religiosa are at large in Hawaii, and if we take a look at it, yeah, it has a similar vine-like root system, and it too grows so fast that, just like bamboo, you can sometimes hear it growing. Also, in terms of decoration and interior design, it is considered an ornamental tree, which is a very noteworthy aspect of it because Xurkitree is fairly ornamental too. You put ornaments on Christmas trees, do you not? Well, Xurkitree is covered with Christmas lights and is even topped with a Moravian star, the iconic Christmas tree topper. Which, come to think of it, these Christmas lights are also kind of like ficuses. Every holiday season, our yards and gutters get invaded by Christmas lights and other decorations. Sure, it's pretty, and Xurkitree always making pretty light shows, but gosh, does it drain a lot of power all of a sudden from the power plants, just like this Pokemon. So yeah, honestly, as silly as... Behold, a Pokemon. It's a pretty well thought out one. But now, why is it shiny blue? Well, because wires come in all colors, each to signify what the wire is for in its specific context. Unfortunately though, there's no universal code, so if you take your knowledge of wiring cars in America and apply it to wiring a house in Japan, you might turn yourself into a light show. But speaking of light shows, Blacephalon also has a load of lights going on all over too. And together, they sort of reference another iconic alien movie, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where the humans and aliens communicate via a light show. I really like how in the anime, Blacephalon and Xurkitree have a small rivalry. Rather than battling head-on, they compete to make the best light show. It's great. But now, what's up with Blacephalon? It's a firework ball, clown, disco light? Well, we actually did a whole video on it all the way back in 2017, but to some sum it up, Blacephalon is based on another genre of aliens, interdimensional cosmic horrors. Literal mind-blowing eldritch stuff, hence its signature move, Mind Blown. As for which specific cosmic horror, I'd say it's pretty obvious that it's based heavily on Pennywise from It and other subsequent scary clowns. Since the 1990 movie, It has gained quite the following in Japan, even getting some major crossovers with other prominent anime when the reboot was coming out. But other than just being an interdimensional clown alien, how else is Blacephalon similar to Pennywise? Well, it similarly tricks kids into coming near it, pops its head, which scares the kid, and then it steals their vitality, just like Pennywise, which tricks kids into coming near it and drives whoever looks at it mad and then eats them, soul and all, steals their vitality. It's pretty one-to-one, and it's not like Pokemon is free from pop culture references. You just don't get most of them because they're Japanese. Blacephalon's explosive move, Mind Blown, is just a play on the fact that to have your mind blown is to see something unbelievable, just like how Pennywise's true visage drives people insane. Also, Blacephalon ain't some hot clown girl. No, Blacephalon is very androgynous looking, which is also like Pennywise, who, while appearing to kids and most people as a guy in a clown costume, is ultimately genderless, and whose true form is so absolutely incomprehensible to humans that the closest approximation Billy's mind could come up with was a female spider specifically. Its true form exists somewhere in the deadlights that Billy came dangerously close to seeing when looking directly into Pennywise's eyes, which are just like the tiny sparks on Blacephalon's head. And Pennywise is essentially the ultimate invasive species. It came from space millions of years ago and periodically awakens to parasitically feed on the sanity and vitality of Earthlings. But there is another possible spacey inspiration for Blacephalon that gets us further away from it. It's the clown-faced nebula, or more specifically NGC 2392. It looks like a head surrounded by a clowny neck ruff, or perhaps like a recent Blacephalon head explosion. Mind blown. And the tiny sparks and its color scheme and stuff also bring to mind sparklers, especially given just how enamored kids are with sparklers, and its shiny even resembles the night sky more so, or perhaps even the dimension of darkness that it comes from. But now, what about real-world invasive species? Well, a tall, skinny thing with a round and not really solid head covered in blips that bursts? That sounds a lot like dandelions to me, which are an interesting case, because though they fit a lot of definitions of an invasive species, they don't actually spread very far despite their seed dispersal method. They actually play really nice with most local species, both of plants and animals, and the only thing they really cause harm to is lawns. Like, yeah, they invade your lawn, but lawns are the real invasive thing here. Me and my homies all hate modern grass lawns. They are terrible for basically everything. But back on topic, technically the only US states that list dandelions as invasive are Oregon and Alaska. Of course Oregon would. Oregon produces more grass than any state. More lawns. And yeah, that means the rest of the states are okay with them because they serve as an excellent food source for many plant-eating animals and insects. But alas, the modern conception is that they are invasive to your lawn. So an invasive and easily spreading plant they must be. So, the heck is up with Stakataka? Freaking bricks.
Behold, a Pokemon.
Are bricks an invasive species? I mean, if you cut the species out of there, yeah, bricks are invasive to nature. Humans and our constructions are the real invasive species. I'm a dozen years old and this is the deepest thing I've come to understand. Honestly though, solid brick walls are pretty damaging to the ecosystem. You've basically just separated the animals on either side. They can't cross over to find food or breed anymore. You gotta build walls and fences with animal crossings. Well, according to the Pokedex, each Stakataka appears to be made up of many life forms, stacked one on top of each other. So yeah, it's just a bunch of bricks, concrete cinder blocks, or I guess sandstone blocks, with eyes, bringing to mind another fun alien trope, the hive mind, or group mind. Aliens who have connected their thoughts to one another to work in perfect unison. They tend to often be partially or fully robotic aliens, or have some sort of psychic ability. But seeing as robots are non-natural, it would make sense to have the ultrabeast based on the hive mind alien trope take the form of something non-natural too. So bricks! It's not totally out of left field though. There's a yokai, the Mokumokuren, whose name means continuous eyes, is considered a classic haunted house inhabitant in Japan. Like, when we in the West think of monsters living together in a haunted house, we think of like standard ghosts, yes, but also a Frankenstein's monster, a vampire, a witch, a mummy, a werewolf. You know, in Japan, they have their own set of generic haunted house monsters, and this is one of them. It's literally a living wall with just so many eyes. And oddly enough, it's not the only living wall from Japanese folklore. There's also the Nurikabe, which purposefully pretends to be a wall to prevent people from going places. You'll remember it from our video about Copper Raja. But now, what if I told you that there is a somewhat invasive kind of animal that could also work as an inspiration potentially? The zooid, siphonophore, or pyrosome. They are all colonial animals, meaning rather than a single creature, they are made up of hundreds of smaller creatures all grabbing onto each other. Pyromosa and other sea pickles are made up of little guys that are each bioluminescent, and thus the main body can glow with tiny little dots all over it, just like the tiny glowing eyes on Stakataka. And many of these animals happen to be tube-shaped, meaning hollow on the inside, trapping their prey inside of them, the same way Stakataka is hollow on the inside. Actually, the pyrosome has this as its description on Wikipedia. The colony is bumpy on the outside, each bump representing a single zooid, but nearly smooth, although perforated with holes, for each zooid on the inside. That's just like how Stakataka is normally, a rough brick wall on the outside, but with perforated eye holes on the inside. But now, are these creatures invasive? Well, yeah, sort of. They are one of the few forms of sea life that actually benefit from warmer and more acidic waters brought about by climate change, so they've been spreading out a lot more than they should be in the last century. Which also brings up yet another alien invasion trope. The aliens are invading as they intend to colonize the planet. But first, they have to terraform it, or xenoform it. Change the ecosystem to their own preferences. Though I guess that's only tangentially related to Stakataka itself, so back to it. You could also see it almost like a manowar, which is a specific type of siphonophore, a bunch of different organisms living as one. You could almost see the manowar as a big wall thing with some tendrils, the same way Stakataka is when it's up on its legs. It's sort of shaped like a box jellyfish too. And you know, it's not even the only jellyfish ultrabeast. There's also Nihiligo, and if you've ever wondered why it's named that, you can click here and check out our first ultrabeast video. And until next time, never stop using your noggin.